What's up guys, I'm here with my Vengeance Demon Hunter Tank Guide for Legion Pre-Patch, patch 7.0.3. Now in this guide I will go over your talents, your spells and abilities, your stat priority, and then your rotation for tanking. Both the single target and multi-target rotations are very similar, and so I'll kind of put those together and then demonstrate it on these dummies for you. And then I'll just wrap up with some macros and add-ons you can use to help you out. Now let's go over your talents first. In your first tier, none of these affect your survivability, so instead we're going to gear toward the bigger damage increase. Agonizing Flames is going to be your default choice. It increases the damage your Immolation Aura does, which is the biggest increase currently in pre-patch for your DPS. It also increases your movement speed as well, which is kind of a nice quality of life little bonus you get there. Now if you do need more movement, you can take Abyssal Strike. It will increase the range on your Heroic Leap type ability, Infernal Strike, and also reduces its cooldown so that you can use it more often. So it's really good for movement, but it doesn't increase your DPS the same way that Agonizing Flames does. Now currently Razor Spikes is not that great. It may scale better in the future, but right now it just is underperforming versus the other two. So for DPS, take Agonizing Flames, and then for more movement, you can take Abyssal Strike. Now level 100, you have 3 really viable talents in different situations, so kind of pick what fits the situation you're in. Feast of Souls just makes your Soul Cleave, which is your Pain Spender ability, heal you for an additional amount over 6 seconds. Pretty simple, very completely passive, you don't have to do anything. You just you talent it and it heals you for more than it normally does. For AoE, you've got a couple choices here. If there's a lot of targets, Fallout can be really good. What it does is it makes your Immolation Aura burst. It bursts at the beginning, and its initial burst then has a chance to shatter, to kind of create these lesser soul fragments, which then heal you for more. So this is really good for a healing burst, because you consume those when, well, either by running over them, but more realistically by using Soul Cleave, which sucks all of those in within a 20-yard range and heals you for a lot. So if you use Fallout, you'll get a lot more burst healing every time you Immolation Aura. You will split off, some number of soul fragments, lesser soul fragments, and then you'll consume them with Soul Cleave, which makes it heal a lot. So it's good for AoE burst healing. Now Burning Alive is really good for both AoE damage, so it's going to get you a lot of AoE damage, but it's also going to actually act as good AoE mitigation, because it makes your Fiery Brand, which is a 1-minute cooldown, spread to targets, and this ability, along with doing damage, actually reduces the damage that the target does to you by 40%. So this is both a good AoE damage talent and actually helps you survive AoE as well, because it spreads this damage reduction. So Feast of Souls for single target survivability, and then Fallout if you want AoE burst healing, or Burning Alive if you want AoE damage and kind of a AoE reduction cooldown on a 1-minute cooldown. So these are all very viable, just kind of pick what fits your situation. Alright, so those are your talents. Now let's go ahead and talk about your spells and abilities as a Demon Hunter tank. First, you've got Shear. Now Shear generates pain. It's just your pain builder ability, and in addition has a cool little effect that it can produce a lesser soul fragment from your enemies. Now soul fragments normally come from shattered souls when things die. Sometimes they leave a little purple thing behind, and you can run over it, then it will heal you for a crap ton. Now if you take a demon soul, so if you kill a demon and then a fragment pops out and you run over that, you get 20% increased damage. With Shear, however, you are producing a lesser soul fragment, so it only heals you for a little bit, but it's kind of nice to have, and it interacts really nicely with your next ability, Soul Cleave. Now Soul Cleave costs 30 to 60 pain, and the more pain you spend, the more you do and the more you heal. It also consumes all soul fragments that you've shattered, so that are kind of lying around, within a 20-yard radius, and you will see that number on your tooltip, and it will tell you just how many souls are in range. So next time you use it, it'll be buffed. It'll kind of heal you extra for all the little souls that get pulled in towards you. Next up, we've got Immolation Aura. It's an AoE, it's got a short cooldown. It does a burst at first and then puts a dot, kind of a dot on you, but it just ticks on enemies near you. Really cool, and it does generate pain over time. Then we do have Sigil of Flame. You put it on the ground, so it's an ability that you put on the ground like so, and after 2 seconds it explodes, and then does an AoE dot to whatever gets hit. Then we have a 1-minute cooldown, Fiery Brand. It's got a range on it, so it's a ranged spell, and you put a debuff on the target, and what it does is it does damage instantly, unless you've of course taken Burning Alive, and then it just reduces the damage that they do to you by 40% for the duration. Now again, this does apply if you use Burning Alive and it starts to jump to other things, then it will apply that 40% damage reduction to those targets as well. So it does a fair amount of damage. It's both a damage ability, kind of active mitigation, and also a mini cooldown. As far as interrupts go, you do have Consume Magic, just like in DPS spec. It does generate pain when you successfully interrupt, so it is really good for you for both your damage and survivability if you can actually get interrupts off. So things like Soccer Thor in Phase 2, or any ads that Sarcastian things that you want to interrupt, like Valhari's ad in Phase 2 for the heal. You also have got Throw Glaive, which is on a really, really short cooldown, much shorter than your DPS counterpart. And it just does a high amount of threat and small amount of damage, and can ricochet, so it kind of bounces to two different targets, and can be useful for picking up ads from a distance. Then we've got our big cooldown, 3-minute cooldown. Metamorphosis, it lasts 15 seconds and just increases your health. So it's essentially a last stand type ability like warriors used to have. It increases your health for 15 seconds, but also generates pain every second for the duration. So it actually gives you a lot of pain. Then we do have our mobility skill, our Infernal Strike. It's like Heroic Leap. You press the ability and you can click somewhere within range and you leap over there, but it also does AoE damage, and interestingly enough, it's actually off the global cooldown, so we'll get into how that kind of plays into your rotation a little bit later. We do have a taunt called Torment, pretty standard. We have a short cooldown for magic and power wards. It reduces the magic damage you take by 30% for 6 seconds on a 20-second cooldown. So it's a very, very nice short cooldown to kind of reduce that magic damage. We've got a couple CC options, also sigils so that you put them on the ground, and then after 2 seconds they explode. First one does silence on enemies, and the second one does fear. So if you need those CCs, feel free to use that at your discretion. Finally, we've got your active mitigation, Demon Spikes, costs 20 pain. It's got a 2-charge recharge system, which is reduced by haste, the cooldown that is, and it reduces your damage that you take from physical damage by 30% for 6 seconds, and also increases your parry chance by 20%. This is your main active mitigation that you'll be using. We do have a CC for demons, kind of like a banish, but it breaks on damage, and then Spectral Sight, which allows you to see invisible stuff. Really useful, I suppose, for trash in Hellfire Citadel leading up to Cormrock or Hellfire High Council for those assassins. If you take damage or do anything while you're in that, though, it does break. So those are your spells and abilities. Now to talk about your stat priority. As a Vengeance Demon Hunter, you've got two options. You can go for a more damage-oriented build or a more survivability-oriented build. Right now, I do recommend the survivability build, especially if you're just starting out, because we don't have things like the Legendary Ring to kind of give us that big 2-minute cooldown, and we don't have any tier sets to help us with cool little bonuses for survivability. So I do recommend that, but you can go the DPS route too if you want to. So for survivability, you're going to want a versatility first, just for the flat damage reduction that you take, as well as the increased healing you do. And then after that, you want haste, and then mastery, and then crit. Now, haste is really good because it reduces the cooldown of a couple of your abilities, namely Immolation Aura for a lot of damage and pain generation, and then also Demon Spikes, which is your main damage reduction that you'll be using as active mitigation. So haste pulls ahead of mastery a little bit, but mastery is also very, very good because it does increase the amounts of damage that your Demon Spikes does reduce, as well as increasing your attack power, which is kind of a side bonus. Critical Strike literally just gives you parry chance in terms of defensive abilities and survivability, so it's your worst stat. Now for damage, you're going to want Mastery first, because that straight attack power buff it gives you, and then Critical Strike for more chance to crit and do more damage, and then Versatility for a flat damage increase, and then Haste, pulling up the rear for the damage benefit it gives you. So, to recap, for survivability you want Versatility first, then Haste, and then Mastery, and then Crit. And then for more damage, you want Mastery first, then Crit, then Versatility, and then Haste. Now let's go ahead and talk about your tank rotation. For Demon Hunters, you pretty much have the same rotation for single target and multi-target. All that changes is your choice of talent at level 100, and they're all passive, so they don't actually really affect how you play. Again, just as a reminder, Feast of Souls for single target, Fallout for AoE burst healing, and then Burning Alive for an AoE cooldown, damage reduction cooldown, as well as just AoE DPS. Now, to build Pain, you're going to want to use Immolation Aura on cooldown, and then Shear on cooldown, or not on cooldown rather, but just kind of spam it until you get enough pain to do what you want with. Just make sure you don't overcap your pain, because you're wasting it if you do. Now you can also use Metamorphosis if you need. It will generate pain, but it also is a 3-minute cooldown and increases your health, so use that when you need to, but just be aware it does also generate some pain for you. As far as spending pain goes, you're going to want to use Demon Spikes for damage reduction. It lasts 6 seconds, does that parry chance increase and your physical damage reduction taken. And then after that, you're going to be using all your pain on Soul Cleave. Now, the more pain you spend on Soul Cleave, the more it heals and the more it does. And you also see that it will suck in those soul fragments that are around you. So you will see that on the tooltip, how many there are, just so you know that if you're going to get an extra big heal because there are a bunch of souls around. Soul Cleave is pretty much your dump. You just use to make sure you don't overcap, and just in case Demon Spikes isn't available anyway. These are your only 2 abilities that cost pain, so kind of manage them like so. Now, as far as using Demon Spikes, you do want to have it recharging most of the time, so you don't want to let it sit at 2 stacks, because you're kind of wasting time that it could be recharging and you could have had extra damage mitigation. So you do want to keep that rolling, but sometimes you can, if you really want to or need to, you can pull up those charges so that you can have a longer period of Demon Spikes, say 12 seconds, right, one after another, rather than just 6, if you need that because there's some boss mechanic that does a bunch of damage over that long period of time. But most of the time, just keep it rolling as much as possible. And then Soul Cleave, just try to use with more pain if possible, but kind of depends on what you need and if you need that heal right now, but it's basically your pain dump. And you should also use Sigil of Flame on cooldown as much as possible. So, to recap, Immolation Aura on cooldown, Sigil of Flame on cooldown, spam Shear to build up pain, and then as far as spending pain, keep your Demon Spikes rolling and recharging as much as possible. You don't have to use them both in succession right away, but just try not to keep them capped at 2 stacks, and then Soul Cleave to kind of dump the rest of your pain and or heal yourself up. Now, a special mention, you can use Infernal Strikes and weave it into your rotation for extra damage because it's off the global cooldown, and even though you're jumping through the air, you can still use your other abilities as you do that, as you're flying through the air. One note though, if you do need it to move somewhere, do not starve yourself of charges of this just for a little extra damage because it's really awkward. For example, on Archimon, if you're supposed to jump from one side to the other, for Lure of Flames, you might want to save at least 1 charge so you're not stuck just waddling over from one end to the other. Other than that, though, you can weave it in whenever you feel. And if there's nothing to move for, then definitely just spam it as much as possible in between your other abilities. You don't really use Third Glaive in your rotation, but you can use it to pick up adds that are spawning from far away, and it does do a decent amount of threats and damage. Alright, now I'll go ahead and show you guys the tank rotation. I'll be using Feast of Souls because it's only one target that's hitting me, but again, switch your talent for whatever situation it fits or you need, and it won't change your rotation, just changes how your abilities kind of work and interact. So I'll go ahead and jump in with Infernal Strike, then Immolation Aura on cooldown, then Sigil of Flame on cooldown, and I'll get Demon Spikes up as soon as I can after I'm spamming Shear. And so Shear to build, and then maybe Fiery Brand to kind of help yourself survive, and then just Shear to build pain. Now keep your Demon Spikes rolling as much as possible. Immolation Aura is off, so I'll use that now. And you can kind of Infernal Strikes in between stuff if you want, just for extra damage. But do remember, if you need to move at some point, please don't starve yourself with those charges and accidentally get yourself stuck waddling over there. Immolation Aura on cooldown, or off cooldown now, so I'll use that. Build up pain, use Soul Cleave to heal up, and now Sigil's off cooldown, so I'll use that. And then build up, use the Demon Spikes here, kind of help myself survive, heal up, use a Infernal Strikes in the middle, Immolation Aura when possible, Demon Strikes again, or Demon Spikes rather, to heal up, or to reduce the damage, and then just back to spamming Shear. And you can see, I see how many soul fragments I have on this bar. I had 1 there, and it just kind of lets you know if you got a bigger heal coming in. So I'll Demon Spikes again for some damage reduction, weave in this Infernal Strikes as I'm doing my rotation, drop Sigil, heal up with Soul Cleave, And then Fiery Brand's up, so here maybe I'll use it because I need some damage reduction. Immolation Aura on cooldown. Demon Spikes for damage reduction, heal up the Soul Cleave, and so on and so forth. Now maybe you need a big health pool kind of increase, so we'll dump a little bit of your pain, use Metamorphosis, get that extra health if you need it. And then Demon Spikes, Immolation Aura on cooldown, dump your pain with Soul Cleave, and so on and so forth. This is pretty much all you do, and again, you can weave in these Infernal Strikes as you like. Just make sure if you need them for something big like moving across the map, that you don't accidentally get yourself screwed by using it for damage. Just keep that in mind. And that's pretty much your rotation. Now if you need to say this Addons just spawn, you could like throw Glaive, pick up some aggro, and then continue. Just remember your Immolation Aura, and your Sigil of Flame, and your Soul Cleave all do AoE damage, so you're pretty much always picking up AoE threat with those, and your Infernal Strike, of course, also does a little bit of splash damage when it lands. So that's your rotation. Now as far as macros, I don't really use any right now because I don't think there's anything worth macroing together. But I do use weak ores for an add-on just to kind of track the cooldown of different abilities. For Fiery Brand, Immolation Aura, and Sigil of Flame, I just want to know when they're coming up so I make sure I use them if I need them, or I need to know, do I have a cooldown coming up, i.e. in Fiery Brand? Do I have a big damage reduction cooldown, or do I need to use Metamorphosis or something, or ask for a cooldown from a healer? You could also track Metamorphosis or Infernal Strike if you want to as well. And I do have for Demon Spikes both a timer tracker and a stack tracker, so I know how many stacks I have, just so I make sure I'm not capping at 2 stacks as much as I can help it. So that's it for this video. If you liked the video, feel free to hit it with a like. If you want to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel so you can see when I put out new content. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Cheers.